Hello and welcome back. Glad to have you. It's the first week of December. It's going to be mid-60s today. We've got some heavy rain coming in tomorrow, so I've got to batten down the hatches for the tortoises to make sure the boys are all put away. We're building the Gavilan Hills Vineyard here at Paradise Ranch. We'd love to have you subscribe, join us, follow along on our journey. Please join us, subscribe, like the video, and watch us on our adventure as we continue this on to our second year now. This is chapter 11. This is essentially a recap of the entire year. We're closing out the year. The vineyard is going to sleep. As you can see behind me, the leaves are starting to change quite a bit. And there's not a whole lot to do right now until February when we start pruning. We first planted this vineyard back the end of March, 1st of April. So we've had about 8 months of growth. We had some really good growth on some of the vines. Some of the vines are still struggling to get going. I'm going to show you some of that. But this video, it's the culmination of the whole year. So I'm calling this the good, the bad, and the ugly. Let's talk about the good things that happen. Let's talk about the bad things. And then let's cover a couple of the ugly things that really hurt us for the year. So the good side of it is the vine growth we had was mixed feelings, is the best way to put it. The Grenache came in really nice. If you look at where we started a year ago, with just a blank hill here, and looking at the Grenache today, I would say we did a good job with the Grenache. For the Grenache, we had 100 plants. We actually only lost one Grenache plant. It may still come back. I'm going to transplant it for next year to see what happens, but right now we did really well with the Grenache. The Cabernet Sauvignon, that's a little different story. It's not as drought tolerant as Grenache, so the Cabernet Sauvignon did well. For a first year growth, we got good growth out of just about all of the plants. I think we lost 5-6 plants along the front fence area, and I'm not sure why none of those plants grew right there in that area, but we'll work on that this year in transplanting those. Sorry, I have one last item I want to put in the good section. We have had a dramatic increase in beneficial insects, and I'll talk about the negative side for the insects in a minute, but we've had a dramatic increase in dragonflies and ladybugs. Tons of dragonflies have come out, and I've got a huge influx of ladybugs all over the grapevines, which are beneficial insects to a vineyard. So another good, love to have the goods, and we're going to try and get rid of the bads. But overall, when you look at the growth in the vineyard, I would say we did a good job for the first year. As they're getting ready to go to sleep, the leaves are drying up. I can see the vines a lot better now, and I can see exactly the way I'm going to be able to prune them starting in February. So I'm really looking forward to next year and seeing what kind of growth we can get out of these. So let's talk about the bad. We're looking at the good, the bad, and the ugly. Let's talk about the bad. Talking about the bad, the first thing I just want to mention is the tree. This tree has been a major pain in the butt ever since last year when we started. It was fairly big. It was really big, in fact, and it was covering up some of the areas, so we trimmed it back dramatically and was able to add a few more vines. The problem was in September we had some really high winds, and those high winds actually broke part of the branches back. As you can see, it just broke the branches and they landed right on the vines. So as a result, I had a tree company come in and we just trimmed it all the way back. Now people say it looks like those trees you see in the African desert. I've got a few little branches on top, but it should grow back higher and out of the way. So that tree was a bit of a problem for the year. So another bad situation we ran into has to do with the exit strategy. In chapter 1, we talked about our exit strategy, where we could One, we could sell the grapes. Two, we could make the wine ourselves. Or three, we would just take the grapes down to a local producer that would take the grapes for us and make wine for us, which was the direction we were heading, in hopes that in 2 years that's what we were going to do. That didn't pan out. I actually went down and talked to the producer, and they will only take 1 ton of grapes at a minimum, and we're not going to have a ton of grapes from any one of these varieties we have. So one of our exit strategies went away, so now we're down to, looks like we're going to be making wine starting next year, and that's going to be a very interesting challenge. But just one of the bad things that came up that modified our plans, our exit strategy is now sell some grapes and make wine ourselves. Still in the category of the bad, we ran into a couple of issues with our vine supplier. It's not one of the things that we can prove, but that vine right there, that vine up over there, and a couple more going back over there, those 4 vines there and a couple more on the other side are actually Cabernet Sauvignon vines in the middle of the Grenache. We also have a Cabernet Sauvignon vine right up here over my shoulder, right in the mix of all these Grenache, like I said. The front fence was all going to be Grenache, and when we got done and we started planting, we've got Cabernet Sauvignon growing on the front fence. So I got Cabernet Sauvignon on the front fence. I've got 6, from what I can tell, 6 Cabernet Sauvignon vines mixed within the Grenache here. And then when we got all done, the entire hill up there that was going to be in the hill, the fence up there that was going to be all Cabernet Sauvignon is now all Grenache. So the supplier, and I can't prove it, and I'm not going to talk about who the supplier is, but I am almost sure they mislabeled the vines. So now the problem is I've got Cabernet Sauvignon mixed in with the Grenache and some Grenache mixed in with the Cabernet Sauvignon. But when we start picking the grapes, we'll have to just be cognizant of which ones we're picking and try to keep them separate. And the last issue in the bad category has to do with the vine trunks. If you look at some of the vines we have, take a look at this vine here. You can see with my hand how nice and big this trunk is and nice and straight it's growing. I didn't tie these up good enough. And as you go along, you'll see that some of the vines are doing real well. Other vines are crooked as heck. Take a look at this one here. You're going to see the vine's pretty big, but the mistake I made on this was not tying the vines up tightly the way I should. This one, just to kind of give you an idea, this is the Grenache as well. You can see the size of this vine compared to the last one. I'll go to the next one. See how nice and crooked that vine is? What I'm going to do is in February I'm going to be going through and pruning these, but then I'm going to tie these vines up so that I get a trunk out of them that's straight. Let me show you a couple other ones here. Take a look at this Grenache. Look at the size of the trunk on this Grenache. Put my hand around to kind of give you an idea. Look, that's it looks almost like it's a 2 or 3 year trunk, but that trunk is only 8 months old actually. But look at how crooked that sucker is. I made a big mistake on not tying these trunks up when they were growing. So when I start pruning these vines in February, I'm going to put some bamboo posts in the ground and tie them to the wire, which will give me the ability to straighten out these trunks as they're growing up, because I was an idiot. I was an idiot and didn't tie these suckers up the way I should. Look at that Grenache vine. Nice 7-foot vine with a crooked trunk. So we talked about the good, we talked about the bad, and let's talk about the ugly. This was a huge shock for me, and I had to get a very quick education to understand what happened. And at the end of August, we went on a vacation. We took the RV and went out we were gone for a little over 2 weeks. Took the boat out to the river, had a good time. When we get back, this is what I found. I found plants that the leaves had completely turned white. These leaves looked god-awful. And I wasn't sure what it was until I looked around a little more, and I found, the first thing I found were horned worms, the hornworms. Tomato worms, what they're used to called, but I have tomato plants in the garden and I never had any. All of a sudden, I found them all over in the grapevine. I found about 15, maybe 20 of these beautiful little creatures that I had to get rid of. The second thing I ran into was these growth on the side of about 3 or 4 of the vines. Down low, you look at this growth, and there's a large growth coming out the bottom of the vine. It's called Gall. I'm sorry, it's called crown gall. It's a fungus disease that gets into the root system and will kill the plant over time. It looks like I've got crown gall in the far end of this section. It's going to affect probably 4 or 5, maybe as many as 8 plants that I may end up being required to remove the plants and replant them maybe next year, because there's nothing you can do about crown gall. There's some insecticides that I can put on, that I've put on to see if I can get rid of it, but this crown gall is going to be a major problem on that side if I lose 6 or 8 plants. So I found worms crawling around in the plants. I found fungus on the side of the plant. And last, when I walked at these plants, as I said, the leaves were white. And when you look at them closely, very closely on the left, you're going to see the leaf that was eaten by those worms right there in the middle. You see them? They're very pretty little creatures. They're called Grapeleaf Skeletionizer. They're yellow and purple color, very pretty little animals, but they do devastating damage to a plant. If you take a look at this plant, looks like almost all of the leaves on this plant were eaten just in that 2 weeks that I was gone. I didn't see any evidence of this in the beginning, and I didn't know what to look for. So as you look at these plants and you understand what happens, the moths from the Grapeleaf Skeletonizers actually lay their eggs in the bark of the trunks or in the root system down low. When the larvae hatch, they climb up and they start devouring the leaves, but they only devour the green part of the leaf, and I forgot what the term is, but they only devour that and they leave the skeleton of the leaf. So bizarre. What I ended up doing was I had to put in some insecticides, which I didn't want to do, but I went through and sprayed all of the leaves in the vineyard. I sprayed every one of the plants in the vineyard, and I found these GLS is a term they use for them, Grapeleaf Skeletonizers, GLS. I found them on about 20 plants throughout the vineyard. Right now I don't have any, I don't see any, but I am really concerned starting next year. It's very interesting about these Grapeleaf Skeletonizers. You can look them up and get a lot of more information about them. I understand they came from Europe and they started invading the United States. Now, when you look at California, I guess they weren't here until only recently. Within the last, I guess it was the last 5-8 years, they showed up in Temecula Valley, Napa Valley. There's actually a professor who works for the University of Southern California at San Diego, who that's her entire job is to track and research Grapeleaf Skeletonizers. And I talked to her, and I'm going to be part of her study next year to see if what I've done will help get rid of them. But these things are, if you catch them early, I understand I'm going to be fine. If I let them go like I did, those plants came back. They're still small, they're still struggling, but the 3 plants that were eaten like crazy will be okay next year, but it did stunt the growth on these plants. So Grapeleaf Skeletonizers, avoid them at all costs. So let me talk about the last of the ugly. And this is one that's very difficult. I wasn't going to put it in, but I've decided I'm going to add it in. The last of the ugly has to do with the vine supplier. Whoever you contact, whoever you use to supply your vines, do some research. Do research on the company that's supplying your vines. As I said, I think the vine supplier that I used mislabeled the vines, so I've got vines intermixed all over the place. Number two, Grapeleaf Skeletonizers don't fly very far. I have no one within 20 miles of me, and I've got Grapeleaf Skeletonizers that the professor believes can only have come through the root system, or the bare root vines that I received, as well as the crown gall. Both of them were probably already in the vines when I received them. So you really need to understand the supplier. I did get some negative comments before I bought for this supplier, which I should have listened to, but I didn't. I've got a new supplier for the new vines we're planting this year. So we've got a new year coming up, New Year's resolutions. It's going to be great. So I'm looking forward to next year with our beautiful little vines. So that covers the good, the bad, and the ugly for this year. The good, I really like the fact that the plants are growing. The bad, we had a few little setbacks here and there, but nothing we couldn't overcome. And the ugly, which is going to be carried over to next year, I'm hoping we're going to be okay with that. As I wrap up this video, I wanted to show one last piece underneath our cut tree here. Up here in the back part of the property, I discussed this earlier in one of my videos, we're going to be adding 100 new white grapevines in this area. We'll be doing 50 Grenache Blanc and 50 Chenin Blanc. We've already got them in order, and they are expected to arrive the end of February. So we'll be planting 100 new grapes up in this area. We'll be documenting the series starting in a couple weeks. So join us. We'd love to have you. So that wraps up this short video. We recently put some 10-10-10 fertilizer on all of the plants as I was instructed. We'll be adding some more 10-10-10 in March as soon as they do bud break. And we're waiting, as you can see, the leaves are starting to change on these vines. We're waiting for the leaves to fall, which probably will happen by the end of the year, probably Christmas. So we're really looking forward to next year to see what we can do to enhance our little vineyard here. Again, this is Jeff. Please follow along, join us. We'd love to have you on our little adventure in the beautiful Southern California desert. Again, this is Jeff. Until next time, we're out.